Thank you all for joining us for today's webinar on beehive fences as a tool for human-elephant conflict mitigation. My name is Chase Ledoux. I'm the Special Project Manager for the International Elephant Foundation, and also joining me today from IEF is Sarah Conley, our Assistant Director of Conservation, and also Deborah Olson, our Executive Director, is on the call as well. Just some housekeeping before I start the introduction to today's webinar. The format of the webinar is I'll introduce our speakers. They'll give a 20 to 30-minute presentation. I have some questions for our speakers as follow-ups to that presentation, and then time permitting, we'll open up the floor for anyone else who may have questions for the speakers. During their presentation, we just ask that you keep yourselves muted and your videos off so we can save bandwidth with everyone joining from around the world. That will help. However, if you have questions you just don't want to save, be sure to put them in the chat, and us at IEF will help sort through those to make sure the speakers can answer them. Okay, so as many of you know, beehive fences have generated a great deal of interest as a promising method for reducing crop breeding and promoting coexistence between people and elephants. But as with any conservation tool, success depends on thoughtful design, long-term commitment, and a strong understanding of local context. Today, IEF is thrilled to be joined by two outstanding speakers from Save the Elephants, who bring deep expertise and firsthand experience to this important topic. So our first speaker is Dr. Lucy King, who is the Coexistence Director for Save the Elephants and for the Elephant Crisis Fund. A pioneer in the development of beehive fences, Dr. King has led groundbreaking research on using honeybees to deter elephants from farms since 2006. Her work has been recognized internationally, including by the United Nations, TED Women, and through multiple environmental prizes. She built the Elephants and Bees Research Center in Tsavo, Kenya, now Save the Elephants Human-Elephant Coexistence Center, and recently helped to develop the Human-Elephant Coexistence Toolbox, a free, comprehensive resource available in multiple languages that I'm sure she'll talk more about today. Joining Dr. King is Aashman Wasan, Elephant Crisis Fund Administrator and Research Assistant for Save the Elephants Coexistence Program. Ash supports a global mapping initiative that tracks the spread and impact of Beehive Fence Project. His work on data visualization and metrics helps us understand not just where beehive fences are being used, but how and why they're working is in different contexts. We're excited to hear from both Lucy and Ash as they share their knowledge and experience today. As I said, following their presentation, we'll have time for questions and discussion, so feel free to drop those questions in the chat. So with that, I'll turn it over to Lucy. Thanks so much.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, and thank you for the nice introduction. We are really thrilled to be here, Ash and I, as members of Save the Elephants and also the Elephant Crisis Fund. We're delighted to be invited to this forum and to meet some of you. So I would, as you said, I'd love to give a presentation, and then afterwards we'll be around for any questions. So just hold your questions till the end. So thank you very much. So I'd like to start off with an overview of who we are as Save the Elephants. Our vision for Save the Elephants is thriving landscapes across Africa to have coexistence, in harmonious coexistence with humanity. And Save the Elephants is really two halves. We are Save the Elephants as an organization based in Kenya, and we also run the Elephant Crisis Fund. And it's through the Elephant Crisis Fund that we've started to really engage with the International Elephant Foundation. We both work with multiple projects around the continent, and we're particularly keen to meet some of you and hear about your projects that you're also working on to do with human-elephant coexistence. So this is just a quick snapshot of where our Save the Elephants Elephant Crisis Fund work happens around the continent. We have three different pillars to do with issues to do with the ivory crisis, which are in blue, projects supporting human-elephant coexistence in yellow, and projects that protect elephant landscapes in green. So some of you might recognize the areas that you're working in Africa. We'd be really delighted to hear about where you're working, where you might overlap with some of our Elephant Crisis Fund grantees. But what I'm really going to talk to you today is about our work in Kenya, and in particular the two areas where Save the Elephants prioritizes its research, which is in the elephant zones within Kenya, which are the green areas you can see here. We work in both the north and an area called Samburu Laikipia, which has around 7,500 elephants in, and in the south in the Greater Savo Conservation Area, which is where I'm going to focus most of my work today, talking to you about the beehive fence projects that we've been running down there. So Kenya has around 36,000 elephants, and they roam over about 22 to 24% of the country. And our national parks only cover 8% of the country, and we have around 11% more covered by community conservancies. But as you can hear from that, there's a great opportunity for overlap between where elephants roam and where communities live within either conservancies or within ranches. And we work very closely with the Kenya Wildlife Service and the Wildlife Research and Training Institute. So all of my work started up in the north doing my PhD research. I'm not going to delve very much into this, but this is the science behind why elephants are scared of bees. And we've got multiple publications on this. I did a series of playback experiments playing wild bee sounds back to wild elephants and recording their behaviors, both visually in terms of their reactions. They tended to dust, to head shake. They would run away in response to bees. But we also did some work placing infrasonic microphones around elephant families listening to bees, and it turns out that they actually vocalize to each other in infrasonic rumbles as well. And when elephants heard those infrasonic rumbles, they would also run away and head shake and dust. So we did about 5 or 6 years of work looking into this. It's really fascinating. We've got some great videos which don't work that well on Zoom. But if you'd like to hear more, we can send you those research papers. But fundamentally, elephants don't like bees. They don't like being stung by them. They can be stung up the trunk, round the eyes, in the mouth. They remember bee stings. They don't want to go near them. So taking this natural behavior, we started to work on how do we apply this to keep elephants away naturally from beehives, and using beehives then as a deterrent for elephants. And that's where all of this research began. So we did most of our work down here in this part of Kenya, which is in southern Kenya, an area called Taita Taveta. You can see those pink farmland areas, which are surrounded entirely by Tsavo East and Tsavo West national parks, full of elephants. We have around, at the time of my research, we had around 12,000 elephants. Now there's around 16,000 elephants that free roam through those pink areas of farmland. So they can move between Tsavo East and the rest of Tsavo West and into Tanzania. So you have farmers like this living right within an elephant zone, and very vulnerable to elephant crop raids. Our project site is against this place called Sagala Hill, which is absolutely beautiful. It's a really stunning place to work. And I know you're all very familiar with human-elephant conflict, so I'm not going to go into it. A lot of you are working directly with this issue. You've seen photos like this before. It's literally elephants walking into communities. Some of the most vulnerable people end up living with these large pachyderms, extremely vulnerable houses made out of mud and tin roofs. And of course, it's very dangerous, not only for farmers, but also for school children going to school. And we're extremely worried about the rise of this human-elephant conflict across Africa. So it's a multi-pronged, completely complex issue. And I just wanted to tell you about this one program that we've been running. We started this in 2013 at the Elephants and Bees Research Center. We built it in 2013. And this led on from my PhD research that showed that beehive fences tentatively were working against elephants. But in 2013, we were given an acre of land down in this beautiful area of southern Kenya, and we built the research center in order to test beehive fences on a large scale. So that's what I'd like to tell you about, not just the pilot studies, but how it's working now on a large scale impact. And fundamentally, there are 4 main advantages of beehive fences, and I'm going to delve into each of these in this talk today. Beehive fences ultimately do help protect farms from crop raiding elephants. This is the number one issue. I'm going to tell you at what percentage. They produce honey. Honey is a massive livelihood benefit. It's also a health benefit, but it really can generate a lot of income. Not just honey, of course. There are multiple products that come from bees, such as royal jelly, wax, even bee venom can be sold. Number 3, pollination services, really critical for small-scale farmers. Bees can help boost yield of their crop, which can be, again, an income-generating aspect to having a beehive fence. And fourth, which is the fourth benefit, is we're finding with our beehive fence farmers that they just enjoy it. It's a hobby. People like beekeeping. This is the same all over the world. People enjoy it. Some people don't. But some people really do, and it's generated a sense of commitment and a group participation in our farmers, and they like that. They like being part of something, feeling part of a solution, part of a bigger picture, being part of a business with each other. So that is another valuable social benefit of doing beehive fences. Now, as I mentioned, we're talking specifically about this here today, but all of the information about these beehive fences you can find in our Human-Elephant Coexistence Toolbox book. It's presently in 4 different languages. It's completely free to access. It's in English, French, Kiswahili, and Ndebele. Within this book, we have a lot of drawings of the beehive fences, as well as all the multiple other methods of how to live with elephants. So I just want to place this in context that I'm not going to delve into all the other methods, but they're all in this book, and you're welcome to have a copy of this as a PDF. We've also developed another 10 steps booklet, which helps put the context of why human-elephant conflict is happening. And that alone is a presentation all on its own, but I'm just very happy to share this PDF with you as well. It's a very brief document, which you're welcome. It's 16 pages, and it's a really nice overview. So just to lay the groundwork there, that we're not just thinking beehive fences are the only solution to conflict. It's just, I'm going to go into the technical details on it. So this is what one of the pages looks like in our Coexistence Toolbox book. On the beehive fences, it shows the different types of designs you can use for the fence. We are a great fan of using the Langstroth beehive at the moment, partly because we're trying to boost income generation through increasing our honey production. But you can absolutely use any type of beehive, a Kenyan top bar hive, traditional log hives. These are all great beehives. They take a bit more to manage, but the Langstroth hive is something that we're quite promoting at the moment, because you have the ability to add a super box on top to create more honey. And because we know it's working against elephants, we're now focusing on income generation. What you'll see here is something called a dummy beehive. So what we do is we put a hive interlinked with a dummy beehive, interlinked with a real beehive. And that dummy is simply to increase the length of the fence, cut down the number of beehives that's needed, and decrease the cost of building the fence. So it's very simple. It's basically tricking the elephant that they think there are more beehives than there really are around a farm. So here's a perfect photo of a beehive with a piece of wire linking that beehive to the dummy beehive, to the next beehive around the corner of the farm, to the beehive, a dummy beehive, all the way around. And you can see the interlinking wire that has to go on the inside of the posts which are holding up the hives. Now, the reason it has to be on the inside is because as an elephant approaches, you want the elephant to hit the wire with its chest and cause all the beehives on either side to swing and release the bees, or at least disturb them enough to make a buzzing noise and to scare the elephants away. And you'll see that each of these hives have got a shade roof on top, which keeps the bees cool. And certainly in Kenya, it gets extremely hot. I'm sure most of your elephant sites are similar, a very, very hot place. If your beehives get above around 35 degrees, the wax can start to melt. So if you're in an area of very, very hot temperatures up to 40 degrees, I don't recommend using beehive fences, because the wax is going to start to melt above 35 degrees, 36 degrees. You'll also see that we've got our donor for this fence that was written on the side. This is important. Who's donating the fence? We have funded by Disney on one side. On the other side, it says supported by Save the Elephants. And then we have a code on the side, which is JK3, which is the initials of the particular farmer whose farm this is. So I think these beehive fences are such a visual representation of your NGO helping people with a deterrent method. It's important that you articulate that and say, this has been donated by you or by the Wildlife Department, and make sure that the farmer's name is on the side in case someone decides to walk off with one. So there we are, these designs, this design of a hive, a wire, a dummy, and a wire all the way around. This is all articulated in the Coexistence Toolbox book. And you can see here how that beehive fence is protecting a farm of crops as it's growing against the bush, where elephants are literally living and roaming. So again, the toolbox has these details. How do you wire the beehive fences together? How do you connect the wires? There's a very, very clever step-by-step process that we've drawn. So if you just go from step 1 to step 2 all the way through, it'll help guide you on how to connect the beehive fence together. And you can see our farmers here connecting them up, putting the shade roof on, and making sure the wire is on the inside of the post. So should an elephant approach, you can then know that the beehives are going to swing. So this is how it works. The shade roofs are really important in our area because it's super hot. In some areas it might be cool enough, the bees might not need shade, but certainly we use either a shade roof, which is made of thatched, or a shade roof made of plywood or something. Again, be innovative with what materials you have. Some photos, you can have log beehives. These are beautiful traditional log beehives. I love these. I think it's a great idea. What I don't want to do is encourage hundreds of people to cut down trees to make log beehives. So please don't cut down trees to make these, but if you already have some, absolutely use log beehives. They're beautiful. A bit more traditional in terms of how you process the honey, but these are really fantastic and very common as well in some of our communities. You can also use these what's called top bar hives. This is a Tanzanian top bar hive. You can have Kenyan top bar hives, which are slightly more sloped. These are our partners, Wild Survivors, who are trialing beehive fences along the Ngorongoro crater around Tanzania. Very successful project, protecting farms on the front line of a huge community area. And these are some of the photos of the elephants being kept on the farm side while the beehive fences, which are very active there, they're very high occupation rate with the Wild Survivors Project, keeping the elephants out. So as elephants do approach your farm, this is a picture actually in dry season in our project site, we can see Tsavo National Park behind us. And then there's a stretch of community land and then the farms begin. So as these elephants approach, it's really critical that you monitor. You want to know how the beehive fences are working, where the elephants are approaching, perhaps where they're breaking through as well. So you need to know where the weak points are on your fence and also how the elephants are moving off and around the community. So we highly recommend monitoring. There's different ways to do that. Our favorite way is by hand. Get out there with a tape measure, work out where the footprints are, measure and record where the elephants are all around the community. How many elephants came in? Are they bulls? Are they females? Write that down on your crop raiding forms. Make sure you just keep a record of everything that happens because you want to know how effective your beehive fences are compared to other methods. And particularly if an elephant breaks through, why did it break through? Where did it break through? Was there another issue going on? So, this is how we started the project, using these very simple forms where we would draw on a PowerPoint literally where the farmer was, where the beehive fence was. This was a lady called Charity. She had a 4-acre farm and we put a beehive fence around 1 acre. And as you can see, those letters R was her initial of her husband, and we put this beehive fence all the way around. And then that black line is where the elephants came in. So that was one day where this elephant was deterred from Charity's fence and off it went. So you can use paper and pen, you can use a handheld GPS, and you can monitor, walk around that line and keep a GPS record by hand if you want of the elephants approaching. Super useful and very, very easy for anyone to do. So you start to collect lots of sheets like this. This is another farmer called Nzai. You start to see everyone, the monitors, your team will start writing on here, where did the elephants go? You can draw little arrows. The one on the left, you can see we had a camera trap in the top right-hand corner up here. So we got some great photos of the elephants approaching the fence and walking around. The elephants didn't get in, and then the monitors can write everything they want to on the bottom. You can make up these sheets, but this is a very simple sheet. The farmers can fill these in or your team can fill them in. The one on the right, I've also included because the elephant got into the fence here. Now, what happened was he walked into the gap. So sometimes we put a gap around the house. We put a beehive fence all the way around the farm or the section of farm that's being protected. And we don't always connect them right up to the house. And in this case, the elephant walked through. So it's important to record that. It's not just, oh, the fence failed. Actually, the fence didn't fail. The fence was just there. The elephant found a gap and walked through. So now you need to think, how do we block that gap? So don't use bees right up to a house. Think of a different method to deter elephants from around the house itself. It could be anything from tin cans, it could be fire, it could be a gabion wall, it could be any smelly elephant repellent, something else to stop the elephants coming around the house. But that's just important, though, to say when the farmer complains to you, oh, the elephant got in, you can go, well, did it break the fence or did it actually get in some other way? It's really important that you don't underestimate how the elephant's getting through into these farms. So that's one really easy way to monitor. We've started to move on to using 123 survey, and our team has developed an app now with 123, just our editing of the 123 app to create a dashboard of what's going on with our beehive fences in Tsavo. So on the right-hand side, you'll see a map of all the different beehive fence locations. The size of the circle helps to indicate to us how many of the hives are being occupied right now. So on the left-hand side, these are 3 villages that we're working with in Kenya: Mwakoma, Mwambiti, Kajiri, the number of beehives we have in each of those villages, the number that are presently occupied, and then it shows what percentage total occupation. So we're bouncing between 35 and 50% at the moment, with around 630 hives at present. And we're pretty thrilled with this, by the way, because we've had almost 3 years of drought in Kenya. So for us, getting back up to 50% is an achievement. We're thrilled. Hopefully that's going to keep going up as our rains have recovered. You can also use GIS, ArcGIS, of course, Pro, if you have that capability. Here is one of our maps that we've created. The yellow is where all our beehive fences are along the edge of the community, and the red is the elephant tracks. We have a number of collared elephants that save the elephants that come into these farms. It's an incredible database. I know not everyone can afford to have collared elephant data, but it's really helpful to have these different layers of different data coming in to help you understand how your projects and beehive fences are working. We've just published a paper last year, which we're happy to share with you. This is 9 years of data, and the grey bars show the percentage of elephants that broke the beehive fence. So some years it was well down, 10, 12%. Other years it went up to 35, 37% of elephants coming in broke the beehive fence. So it's really important to do long-term studies. If you have one bad year when you've had 60% of elephants only kept out, rather than just saying, oh, it's not useful, just keep the long data records going, because some years it's going to be 90% effective. So what we found was over the period of 9 years, it was around 76% effective for every single elephant that approached. And that was across the whole year, through the droughts, through the difficult times, through low occupations. So around 76%. When we looked at the peak crop raiding seasons, we had 6 peak crop raiding seasons. We actually ended up with a much higher percentage of deterrent. Around 86% of elephants were kept out. And that, of course, was because crops arrived with the rains, and rains provide healthy, strong bee colonies. So the stronger the bees, the better the deterrent rate of your beehive fence. And that really takes me to, the next point is almost all of the success rate of beehive fences is around beekeeping. It's all about training your beekeepers. You can't have a successful beehive fence unless your farmers know what they're doing with the bees. And I would say train your farmers, train their spouses, and then retrain them again in a year's time. And in that first year of having a beehive fence project, you really need to have a staff member who knows about bees, who can go around consistently helping those farmers look after the hives. There's got to be a lot of monitoring, a lot of hive checks. You've got to really keep on top of pests and parasites. You've got to understand when the wax moths are coming into your empty hives, looking for large hive beetles and getting them out, really getting the farmers super confident. Because this is what happened to us. We ended up with a really bad drought, and we ended up with losing up to 80% of our bee colonies. It was very devastating. But you need to be able to ride through these bad times with your farmers so they understand why their colonies have gone down, because they're involved and they know about the bee biology. So we had a terrible drought. We lost so many of our bees, and it took a number of years for the bee occupation to go up. So the more you engage the farmers, the more they get to really appreciate, what the point, how this method works. So I would say if you do have low occupation rates, there are several methods you can help improve your colony rates. Obviously, providing water. You have to provide water. The bees drink every single day, sometimes multiple times a day. You have to feed them if it's very dry. You can cut open fruit and leave fruit to be fed on by the bees. Like these are mangoes in Mozambique, where we had a bee project. You can also open up watermelon or anything, just fruits that are going rotten in the market you can buy. Putting fresh beeswax combs in. And my favorite is catcher boxes. So hanging some of your beehives right up in the trees, because bee swarms fly high and they'll be looking for flowers and places to collect nectar. So have some catcher boxes up in the trees, or just put some of your empty hives up in the trees, and that will really help capture some swarms. There's a great sheet on beekeeping and safety in the toolbox book, so I hope this will help you understand more about beekeeping. There's lots of information online as well. One thing about maintenance is you are going to get some farmers who just don't do it. So you have to accept that, typically sort of 80-20 rule, 80% of farmers are going to be super excited about this. 20% are just not going to take, they're just not going to take to it. They're either going to be too scared of the bees, they just aren't interested, or they just slowly give up. So we have a memorandum of understanding with our beehive fence farmers that we are giving them the beehive fence, we're giving them the hives, but within the collective, the cluster of farmers that we're working with, if a farmer literally refuses to maintain his fence after a period, I think we said between 4 and 6 months of being repeatedly asked by the group can move his beehive fence to another farmer. So I would recommend having an MOU, making sure the farmers know exactly what's expected of them if you're donating something so valuable as a beehive fence. And we don't want beehives to be ruined and left on the ground. So if someone really isn't going to maintain it, let's move it on to someone who wants it. And then things as an NGO, what I think you can really help with, which is an investment, and you can't expect farmers to contribute to this. Things like apiaries. This is Wild Survivors again, their beautiful apiary. in Tanzania. Really helpful to have an apiary with some bee colonies that you can work on outside of the beehive fences. This is one from ZSL in Savo. These are just different designs. It can be very simple. You need the mesh around it to stop honey badgers breaking into the hives. And these are incredible places where you can train your farmers, you can train your students, you can help grow your colonies, split them, make lots and lots of hives very fast. You can do queen rearing to boost weak queens, and you can feed your beehive fences with colonies from these apiaries. So I do recommend an apiary if you can afford it. You can do things like queen rearing, which is very advanced. Not all of our projects do that, but that helps boost queen strength. If you have a weak queen, you can replace her, which is kind of cool. We also recommend, if you can afford it, to build coexistence hubs, so places where the beekeepers can come to store their honey, to process their honey. This is a great one that Elephants Alive and Mozambique Wildlife Alliance built in Mozambique, which is just a container with a beautiful shade roof on top with a deck where they can have meetings. They can also look out for elephants, but in the container they can store all their equipment and it's lockable. This is one that we built in Savo, a coexistence hub, which has 3 different rooms and a really nice meeting space outside. We have an office, a storeroom for all the hives and beekeeping kit, and then a kitchen or a processing room where you can process the honey or your chili oils or whatever you want. And these are fantastic places to have your beekeeping training events. And I love these ideas. We're building lots of these coexistence hubs, giving people a place to talk about elephants, ideas that they can do. We can also demonstrate other methods, like here, this is how we protect water tanks in Kenya in our project. We build white stone walls around water tanks. So giving you this hub, you can demonstrate a lot of other HEC methods. And I love this one. It's so clever. It just stops elephants walking to the tank, but people can still get to it to get their water. So of course, if you're serious about putting a beehive fence project up, you want to be thinking about your honey, making sure you have a hygienic processing room. You want your farmers to get into the mode of being professional beekeepers, having their hats on, wearing gloves, cleaning the honey, finding a place where you can label your honey nicely and putting great jars out there ready to be sold. So many of our projects have come up with beautiful labels that they can use to illustrate. We call ours elephant friendly honey, but you can call it whatever you want. But it's really nice to get the story of farmers living with elephants onto the label so that you can then sell it at high-end lodges or in local shops. It's very, very popular. The story itself really helps bring an income to the community. You can also make lip balms, of course, out of the wax. And so in the toolbox, you'll find a step-by-step guide of how to make these lip balms. These are our elephant-friendly lip balms that we make on the project in Kenya. So do go back to the toolbox. It's really great. And also it'll help. This toolbox gives you ideas for elephant-friendly farming that are also bee-friendly. So we use a lot of sunflowers now. So sunflowers are not eaten by elephants. It's a really good non-palatable crop. It works. It grows really well in the Savo soils. It might not grow that well in your area, but in our area, it's a brilliant crop. The elephants don't eat it, and it's boosting our honey production and creating a different type of crop that the farmers can sell. There's loads of different crops that elephants don't eat. So we've done a whole sheet in the toolbox of chili, showing you that chilies, eggplants, okra, turmeric, garlic, sesame, lemongrass, herbs, all of these things elephants don't eat. So if you want to have a beehive fence, stay organic. Don't put pesticide on your farm and think about what other crops you can grow that don't attract elephants, particularly to the front line of farms. And that's where really where you want your beehive fences to be. So this is really important to go into this toolbox, make sure you read it. It's in these 4 languages. We're in the process this year of creating the Portuguese one as well. Hopefully we'll have some more translations going forward. And that the contents is really clear. There's 7 different chapters giving you all these different deterrent methods for boundary protection, for what type of compatible farming, tree protection methods. And just a last plea really for beehive fences is it's such a good method, but don't use it around schools, please. You don't want bees near kids under any circumstance. It's not safe. Having them around farms where you're training farmers and making sure they're looking after their children is one thing. But around schools, we've done a whole section in the toolbox around protecting schools and maybe other compounds like clinics or police stations, and lots of different boundary protections that you can put in, which do not include bees for schools. So that's super important. And yeah, I know you'll love the toolbox. Do email me if you can't find the link clearly online, and we'll make sure that we get a copy to you. So I'm going to hand over to my colleague Ash to explain. He's going to explain to you where beehive fences are around the world and how you can help contribute to this fantastic mapping process that we're doing as more and more of you are starting to take on this method. So thanks very much, and over to you, Ash.
Thank you so much, Lucy. That was really great. So Dr. King and I last year started doing a project where we started mapping beehive fences on a global scale on this platform called Restore. And so today my part is to take you through the platform, what we've done, how we aim to map these beehive fences, and what we aim to do. So Restore is a platform that was a finalist for the Earthshot Prize in 2021, and this is how their dashboard looks. So as you can see on the screen, this is when you open Restore, you'll be asked to log in and create a profile, and they call themselves the Google Maps of nature. So now I've highlighted a few things. If you look on the map, that you can see 250 plus, you can see all these numbers, 10, 60, 250, 5,000. And these are just the amount of projects that you have in these different sites in these different countries, and what people are doing either for restoration or conservation. So these yellow dots that you're seeing are literally the sites. So when you create your profile on the side, you'll have a dashboard where it shows you all your sites that you've listed, or if you remove that feature, you're able to see all the sites in general that are listed on Restore. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is what an organizational profile looks like. So Dr. Lucy and I set up this profile for Save the Elephants. And if you look at the map now, there's like the sites have gone down to just the sites that we've created on this map. So we have 70 plus down in Kajira in South Kenya in Savo, where Dr. Lucy mentioned she started a project. We have 9 in up in North Kenya, and then we have a few in Malawi. We have 7 in Thailand, and we're continuing to build this profile of beehive fences that we're creating across the map. So this is exactly what your profile will look like. We can help you set this up, and we can start mapping beehive fences using this. Next slide, please. So this is just to zoom in on the farm sites where Dr. Lucy mentioned she started the whole project. And as you can see on Restore now, those numbers are showing you the amount of beehive fences we have in each plot. And the yellow dots are literally the beehive fences, so those are a little more far apart. And you can see our dashboard is still showing us Save the Elephants. So it just shows you the sites of that organization. And at the bottom, if you look under the Goi rock on the hill, you can see a little profile of Jonas Mokima's beehive fence from Save the Elephant. So whenever you hover your mouse over a certain site, it gives you a little overview. And then when you click on that site, next slide, please. When you click on that site, it opens this satellite image or mapping of what we've done. So literally that yellow line that you're seeing is what we mapped out as Jonas's beehive fence. On the right side, on the left side, you see Jonas's dashboard. So here it tells you this is the farmer, the organization that he's working in. We've put in 8 photos of his farm and his beehive fences. It talks about Save the Elephants, how many hectares you're working in. So this is 0.41 hectares of his farm protected, and whether we're doing conservation or restoration. So that's a conservation project. Next slide, please. So now you can see this has changed to about this side. So this is quite key for us when we're creating these kind of projects and mapping the beehive fences is the about section. So in this section, we talk about what year you set up the beehive fences, how many hives the site has, what the aim of this project is, benefits like obviously coexistence, and then all the other benefits Dr. Lucy has talked about, like honey, and then obviously the size. So what we do is we help when you have a site, we map it out, and then we can sit down together and adjust the corners. Maybe we've missed out a beehive fence, or mapped it in a different way from how it actually looks. And then you can talk about when you started this project, what you're doing on it, and everything in this about section. And then it gives you a ton of scientific data. So when you map out this polygon on Restore, and just before I move on, Restore is a free platform. They are paid versions, but we're using the free version as well. And as soon as you map out a polygon, it gives you this plethora of data of just scientific data. It gives you biodiversity, carbon, water, risks, land cover. And this is so this slide just shows you some of the data that comes out from this just mapping, literally just mapping out your polygon on this map shows you all this immense amount of data. And for example, if you look at the right side of your screen under environment at the bottom right, you see annual mean temperature is 23.78 degrees. So this can help you both before you start and when you finish. So as Dr. Lucy mentioned, if you have a mean temperature of about 40 degrees and plus, it wouldn't be as advisable to put beehive fences because the wax will melt. So in such a case, you can map out the potential area you want to set up your beehive fence in and see, okay, so this has an average temperature of 23.78, for example, in terms of Savo. And so this is a good site to set it up with. And this temperature has been calculated over 40 years. And you just get this plethora of data similar to this, like that. You get net primary productivity and all this data. And it's just brilliant. It tells you a lot of stuff about not only your site, but the area around it, whether it'll be good or not to set up the beehive fences. Yeah, next slide, please. So this is how our partner profiles look. When we set up a profile for you, or when we set up a profile with you, we give you full credit for your site. All we do is we're trying to map all the beehive fences so people across the the world doing beehive fence projects connect with each other, learn from each other. So for example, taking you to the complete right side, you'll see that the organization that we're working there is Bring the Elephant Home. So Bring the Elephant Home set up their restore profile. I helped them sit down and map their sites out. They're doing a different kind of beehive fences where they're putting them in front, just in the pathways of elephants. So they're not protecting the full farm, but instead just putting it in the pathway of the elephants so that the normal routes that the elephants are using are blocked off. So in such a case, we've set up a profile with them, mapped out their sites, and given them full credit for their site. We've even created for them a Thailand Beehive Fence collection. We've done the same with Savo Trust in Kenya, the Mount Kenya Trust, and the Mount Elgin Elephant Project. So in such a case, we map out the projects with you, and we sit down, we can have Zoom calls, adjust everything to how you'd like it, and create your profile for you. And then we keep building on each other's data as such. So I have put my email down there, and I'd love for you to, if you're setting up a project or if you already have a project, then if we could get in touch and you could send me GPS points, or if you have already mapped out files and shape files, or you just have coordinates and points, you can send them to me and we can start building a restore profile and mapping these out. That'll be really great. So thank you so much.
Wow. Many thanks, Ash, and thanks to the International Elephant Foundation for hosting us today. And if, as Ash said, if you have any questions at all after this meeting, or if you're watching this online on the video afterwards, please do email us. We're happy to help, happy to share the data sheets that we have, all the documents, the books that we have. Everything's open source at Save the Elephants. We're a charity, so we have grants as well that manage our work. And that means that we're happy to share everything with you as well. And really our motivation here is just to share our experience on a particular method that works really well under certain circumstances, which of course helps both elephants and bees, which is really critical, and of course ultimately people to live in harmony with elephants, which is the mission that we're under. So we welcome any questions, and back to you. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Lucy and Ash. It was really great to learn more about your work, and clearly not something that happened just overnight and represents so much effort. Um, I really liked the mapping tool that you are using and analyzing too. That's really great to be able to track what's going on around the world. Related to that, I saw a few map points in Asia, and I know we've got a few attendees from Asia on the seminar today. And so I'm wondering, in your experience, if you've noticed any differences in the setup or the effectiveness of beehive fences in Asia compared to maybe the sites you're more familiar with in Africa.
Yes, yeah, it's a huge topic. Conflict in Asia is really becoming very serious. At Save the Elephants, we have an Asian elephant news service, and it's quite startling that the amount of conflict that's coming through every single day. I do encourage you to sign up for that, for this free news service. It's eye-opening what's happening. So beehive fences, of the research that I've been working on has been with African bees and African elephants, both of which are genuinely completely different species to the African, to the Asian elephant and Asian bee species. I've done some research doing playbacks in Sri Lanka of Asian bees to Asian elephants. It was way less effective. Around 56% of elephants moved away. Sorry, yeah, 56% of elephants moved away to the playbacks. And what we found with the beehive fences that we trialed there is that the very small Asian bee is less of a stinger, the cavity dwelling Asian bee. So they're much harder to manage. They have much smaller hives, much less honey, and they're heavily affected by pesticides. And so we found that quite a challenge in some of our trial sites. Was there's an intense use of pesticide use, particularly in the farms in Sri Lanka we were trying. Now, the project in Thailand is very successful. Thailand had European bees introduced in around the 60s, 1960s, which have become quite resident in Thailand. And so they've been using European bees not because they've imported them, they just are in Thailand now. And those are quite effective because they're a bit more aggressive than the Asian bee. But the Thai project there, which Ash talked about, are trialing Asian bees as well as the European bee. But of course, we're not encouraging anyone to import African bees to other countries. African bees are just particularly aggressive, very notoriously aggressive. They look after their honey stores, so they will sting very ferociously. And as they sting, they release a pheromone that triggers the rest of the bees to attack. So their behavior is particularly prone to working to keep African elephants out. So I don't think it's as successful in Asia. You just have to weigh it up as like, is it something that you want to include as one tool in a suite of tools for your method and your project? Because of course the benefits of beekeeping remain, and it's fantastic to have beekeeping anyway on your elephant project. But I wouldn't rely on it as effectively as being as effective as the African elephant beehive fences.
I think that's a really good point, and something you mentioned during your talk too is beehive fences aren't the silver bullet, just like no method is the silver bullet. So a lot of these things are more useful in conjunction with each other. And going off the Thai project, Ash, I noticed you said during your presentation that they had set up the beehives not necessarily in a fence, but in the paths of where elephants normally traveled. And I've seen pictures of these beehives online, and sometimes they're not arranged in like a fence, like you would typically think they would be. Have you found it's particularly effective or any bit effective to have them not arranged in a fence?
So what I noticed, because I was visiting the site recently, and what I noticed they've done is so they've mapped out where the elephants usually enter the community from, and they have a small road dividing the park and the community land. And so what they've done is instead of map like fencing off a whole area because it's farm next to farm next to farm, they've tried to map out where the elephants come in the most, and then put a string of five beehives using Dr. King's methodology of putting the string on the inside and everything like that. They have done the same thing for about using just five hives. And so when the elephant comes in, Asian elephants are less aggressive as well, as are the Asian bees. So when they come in, they have been deterred by it, but they're still doing their analysis on whether it's as effective as the Kenyan ones. I mean, the African fences. But from what they said is they've seen the elephants come to the fence and walk away from it. So it is effective, but they're just trialing out new ways and new methods to make it, yeah, more effective.
Good point. And I think the critical part of that is, as you all are doing, is monitoring the activity and seeing what's effective and adjusting as needed.
Yeah.
Great. So we have some questions populating the chat. I encourage attendees to keep adding to those, and Sarah and I will do our best to share those with the presenters. I just have a few more questions as people get in their questions in the chat. Given that we have some people on the call who may have used fences before, but a lot of people who are considering uses fences, do either of you have any advice to someone who may be eager to try beehive fences, but they're unsure if the local community would be supportive of beekeeping or if it would be effective in their area? What sort of advice do you give to people who are just starting out?
Yeah, thanks. I think this is really important. You know, we love beehive fences. We think they're really effective, but it's no joke starting a project of this scale because it's a very, very long project, right? You've got to integrate a livelihood project into an elephant deterrent method. We think it's so good because it's one of the only elephant deterrent methods that makes you money. Others tend to cost you money all the way through, and you're constantly paying out for maintenance and things like this. This is the one method that can generate you an income and keep elephants away. And it doesn't take up any space because you can hang your beehives around your existing farm, so you don't have to change anything. So we think there's all these benefits to it, but you have to be quite you have to think through all the different investments you as an NGO need to make in order to make it successful. When I say on my presentation about beekeeping training, that is no joke. You have to have a trainer, that's expensive. You have to really think about making sure the farmers are confident with the bees because they're already dealing with elephants coming in, which is already scary. And now they're dealing with another species, which is slightly scary. And unless you are a natural beekeeper, of which we're getting fewer and fewer now in our modernizing communities, people are quite nervous about the bees. And so you're trying to get them to work with two quite risky animals. So I think really think it through. And if I can recommend, if you're not sure, first of all, do a survey and find out if there are any beekeepers already in your community, and find out if any of them would be interested to join you in the project, because you need skilled, old, experienced beekeepers to help you with this project. And then secondly, start with the beekeeping. Get a few hives, put them in trees, get an apiary, start a beekeeping project and see how people take to it. Start the process of educating them around how they deter elephants. Put some in trees and see that the elephants will not come to those trees, and slowly let the community understand that this works. You're welcome to have our videos. You can show people our experience that elephants will run away. But mostly people are disbelieving that this is going to work. So I would start slow. And then when you've got a farmer who's really keen, or one of your staff members, say, listen, would you like a pilot beehive fence? Let's just put one beehive fence up around one farm with someone who's super active, who's going to look after the bees, and create a demonstration, one pilot, one farm, possibly two, and just let the community see it and learn from it. And the first elephants that come up that are deterred, it's like a waterfall goes off, and then suddenly you have 50 people wanting a beehive fence. And that's what's happened to us. We're kind of flooded by requests now, because you just need to let people see it for themselves. And that's why I would recommend starting small. But all the way right from the beginning, you need the training, and then you need the equipment, right? You've got to have the bee suits, you've got to have the buckets, you've got to have wellies, you've got to have gloves, you've got to have a smoker, because you've got to make sure your farmers are going to be safe. You can't use traditional methods if you're the NGO, because you can't afford someone to get stung badly, so much so that they go to hospital. You've got to really think through the safety features of that. And so you need that kind of initial investment, and that can be quite substantial. And I really recommend thinking through all the way to the honey processing side, because the honey and the sale of honey is the financial incentive to keep the maintenance going. You want to make sure that people are receiving that money, they're getting clean honey, they can sell it for a good price, it looks attractive, and it generates this kind of buzz around the project. So you do need a storeroom, somewhere you can lock the honey to keep the rest of the bees out, somewhere to process it, be hygienic. So yeah, it's not a small undertaking, but if you're keen to help provide a livelihood benefit to your communities as well as the elephant deterrent, this is a win-win. It's such a great project. But I just would say don't undertake it lightly. That's the only thing.
Yeah. Do you notice any like specific qualities of communities that have really embraced beekeeping? Like, is there something just inherent about these communities who embrace beehive fences, or
Um,
you have to
I
really rely
think we're
on?
working with the real frontline farmers out in the bush in Kenya. So most of them have beekeepers. I really love working with the traditional communities. The harder communities are the urban, peri-urban communities that are already a bit more urbanized. And that's a bit more of a heavy lift. But in most traditional villages in Africa, you do have old people who are beekeepers, or some young guys who've got their own hives. It makes it a bit easier. But the one thing about beekeeping and honey is almost every traditional community has beekeeping in it somewhere, particularly in Africa. I'm not sure if it's the same in Asia, but in Africa, honey is super valuable. It's incredible sugar. It's a sweet source of sugar. It's a gift within the communities. It's definitely shared at weddings. It's like, so you're not introducing a whole new concept. Beekeeping already exists in these communities. It just might have got lost over time. And you're basically introducing a new way to manage your bees, whereas traditionally people would just put them up in trees and leave them for 6 months and then go back. So it's not a totally novel idea, but yeah.
Yeah, that's good to know. And then just one final question before we open it to the chat. Do you have a rough estimate about what people may have to budget to start up a beehive fence project, even if it's just a small pilot study that you mentioned earlier? I know it'll
Yes.
vary region, but
Yeah,
yeah.
of course, it's about the equipment. But so the hives, the first beehive fence that I built, I bought the beehives for $4 each. There was the traditional log beehives. I bought them off someone. I gave them to the farmers when I built it. So each hive was $4, and I bought a roll of wire to connect them. And we went and cut some posts from the bush and built it like that. So it cost like $37 for 100 meters. Now with these Langstroth hives, we're buying quite professional, proper beehives. Each one is about $50. So that's a much bigger investment. And we use 12 beehives per acre. So if you're having to buy 12 hives at 50, 55, $60, that's quite an investment. It can add up to $800 pretty fast. And if you have to buy the posts, that's a big investment, because if you're buying tree posts in Kenya, that could be $5, $6 a post. So you've really got to think through whether you've got some resources that are free, as in free beehives that are already in the community, whether you're having to buy the materials to make your beehives. We've tried, wire is one thing that connects the hives. Now we use wire. We don't have a huge problem with snaring in our area, but where we did some beehive fences in Mozambique, our community partner said there's no way we're putting wire, that it'll be used for snares. So we used some plaited rubber that they stripped off the tires of trucks and plaited this kind of rubber together, and it held the beehives and it was strong enough, but you couldn't take it down and use it as snares. So, and another project in Mozambique used a sisal rope, and they soaked the sisal in chili, and they had a chili, what they called a spicy beehive fence. So the beehives were linked with spicy rope. So these poor elephants, I think only 4% of elephants approaching ended up getting through them, because it was this combination of the acrid chili, oil, and the beehives. So, thinking through what's appropriate for your area, what materials you have, what your budget is. So if you're applying for a grant, you've got to really think through, don't just ask for everything, think through what you can get free locally, particularly coppicing some trees if there's a place where you can get some trees for the posts. We use a tree called the comifera in Kenya, which regrows. So we don't feel quite so guilty if we go and cut down 10 to make a beehive fence. They actually regrow. And they regrow once you've planted them in the beehive fence location. So you end up with these small trees holding the beehives, and that's lovely. That's your natural shade. So you can make it very expensive, but if you really think through and you don't have the budget, just pare down those expenses and make it use what materials you have.
Great. Yeah, some innovation goes a long way in that case. Okay, Sarah, I'll throw it to you. Do we have good questions in the chat for Lucy and Osh?
Absolutely. Thank you guys for a great presentation. We're getting a lot of questions about specific species of bees. So, have you found that there's a specific species that's more effective than others? Are you just using the native bee species in each region?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in Kenya, there are multiple African savanna bees. We're using the Apis mellifera scutellata. Now that's the most common savanna bee species that you get in most areas in East Africa, certainly, and down into northern southern Africa. There are multiple bee species, honey bee species we're talking about. There, of course, there's millions of other bee species, but for honey bee species, so that particular bee, even in Kenya, we have 3 different bee subspecies. One's right up in the mountain, one's down on the coast, and they are less aggressive than the African savanna bee, which is what we're using. So there's been some work in forest elephants as well, using different bees, which tend to be less aggressive, but they have been proven to be successful against elephants if they have strong colonies. So the priority for us is, I wouldn't mess around with introducing any bees to your area. You want to be using your local bee species. It's got to be the local honeybee, the cavity dwelling bee. I know in India and Asia, they have bees which aren't cavity dwelling. One of the most aggressive Indian bees creates these dorsata, I think Apis dorsata, these huge combs up on the trees. So you can't force those into hives, which makes it very difficult to use that bee for a beehive fence. So it's just, the reality is you have to understand the biology of your species. And in East and Southern Africa, this Apis mellifera scutellata is the most common African savanna honeybee. And that's really working against African savanna elephants. And that is where a lot of our conflict is happening. But I can't speak to all of the bee species, and I do encourage you to do some research first before you invest a huge amount into an unusual location that there is no research into the 2 species.
Absolutely. Very important to know what species you're working with. Um, Going along with that, bees obviously are naturally present in the habitat. In your experience, have you observed how elephants respond to these bees, say, within forest habitats? Is their reaction similar to when they react to the beehive fence?
Mm. Yeah, so we've done quite a bit of work sort of trying to observe elephants with natural bees. It's really hard because we know that they avoid them. So it's very hard to ever see kind of the genuine interaction. I mean, I hung up some beehives in trees in the bush in Samburu, not in beehive fences, just out there to try and get this interaction. I was lucky enough to see elephants running from bees coming out of the hive once, but it's really hard to see them. So it's quite hard to study something when the theory is that they don't ever interact. They stay away from each other, which is why the bee playback works so well. But right from the beginning, the reason we knew about this was because it was a folklore in Kenya. So pastoralists, traditional pastoralists out in the bush had seen this, and they were telling stories that elephants would run away from bees, or they wouldn't forage in trees with beehives in. So, again, we really encourage talking to the old folk and the old people. They know these stories, whether it's going to work or not. And there are no old stories that this works in India. So that's why we were quite intrigued as, are these bee species in India strong enough? The real true Asian bee species, the Apis cerana indica, is that bee species aggressive enough to deter elephants? We're not sure. The work that I did showed around 56% effective, but it was quite a small study. So, but even if only half the elephants are kept away by these beehive fences, that's half the problem. And then you can layer it with your other deterrents. And again, our bees need help all around the world. So if you're providing new homes for bees and it has an element of deterrent, and you're engaging people in the conversation about their environment, about protecting their flowers and flora and fauna, and protecting elephants, and getting a benefit finally from having elephants in their land, then it can help. But I think you have to weave beehive fences in Asia in with other deterrents to make sure they're successful.
That's a great way to segue to our next question, which you may have just answered, but you might have another thought on it. Would you recommend a native beehive fence pilot project for HEC mitigation in northern India?
Yes, absolutely. So we have a really great colleague called Dr. Prachi Mehta. She's working down in Karnataka in India, and she has been trialing beehive fences with pot beehives and all sorts of other deterrents. And she's got some really good research. And so she's probably the most experienced person who's been trialing this for actually probably 10 years now with her community. I think she has 300 hives or more maybe now. So she would be a great person to get in touch with to share her experience. And she's very much focusing on the livelihood as well, encouraging people just to have bees and then placing them in the path of elephants. So you're doubling down on the motivation. So I would highly recommend contacting her. She's done some nice crop raiding deterrent manuals, which includes these Indian bee hive fences. There's a few publications that have come out. So there is some work out there. Happy to share a folder of the research that I've heard of. But her website's pretty good, and she's working for the Wildlife Research Conservation Society of India. So hopefully she won't mind being asked some questions.
Excellent. Yes, that's a great resource. Um, we have someone native in the region asking if you have ever seen beehive fences used or used them in HEC conflict hotspots like Kasagao, Kishushe. I'm sure I'm saying that wrong. What do you think?
Yeah, so what we're doing, we're slightly inundated with requests for beehive fences. So we can't, our team is pretty small. We can't go and put beehive fences everywhere. So what we're doing now in our area of Savo is we invite people in. So anyone is welcome. We do a monthly training session called a Trainer of Trainers. It's literally every month. There's one happening this week. They're free to attend. People just need to get there. We have about 25 people every month from all sorts of NGOs. They are welcome. So you're welcome to come. But we can't go to every village and build beehive fences, I'm afraid. We just don't have the budget. We're already kind of soaked with all the different needs that we're getting from the ECF and our own projects as well. We've got over 55 farmers just in our site alone, and other sites that we're supporting through the ECF. But you're so welcome to come, see if it's something you would like to do yourself. And then our team might come and help you put up your first one, but we just can't go to every community and build beehive fences. But come and see us, come and visit our project, come and learn. Come and meet the farmers. We often just, when we have visitors, we just say, go and meet the farmers, spend 2 hours with them, go and chat to them. They'll tell you how it's working, how it's not, what the issues are. And we're very happy to share like that. So we're pretty much an open book on that front.
Awesome. That is an incredible resource. And then, have you noticed any habituation by elephants to these? Do the elephants, herds, adult bulls, do they respond differently?
Mm. Yeah, it's a good point. So when we have a breakthrough of a beehive fence, when I say we've had 86% effective in the crop breeding season, that means 14% did get through. So that's interesting to me. How did they get through? Did they get through a live beehive, or did they get through an empty hive? And therefore that was just basically a matchbox that they walked through and they didn't even notice. But if they break through an actual live beehive, that's super rare. So we've had that only a few times. Sometimes we've seen a live beehive be knocked into and fall into the ground by an elephant, and the elephants just run off. So they've run away. They haven't run into the farm. So, and maybe they need to learn. Not every elephant would have been stung by bees. So it's possible that there might need to be a learning process. But we're not seeing any habituation at all of elephants with live bees. When I did my bee playback experiment, I played bee sounds to elephants multiple times, and I started to see a reduction in their reaction because they realized that there was nothing negative. They weren't being stung. There was no negative interaction at all. But with the live bees, there's too much going on. They're being stung. It hurts. They can swell from that. The bees will fly around their face, around their eye. It's very erratic, and elephants don't like that. They don't like erraticness. That's why elephants very slowly over time will learn how to break an electric fence, because it's static and they can look at it and they can study it and they can work up, they can go to it and push it down and work it out. But beehive fences swing and move and creak and make noise. So they just hate it. So we're not seeing habituation of active live beehive fences. But they will walk through an empty beehive fence. It's no different to any other deterrent. They could smash it in a second. It's a very thin box for the size of a 6-ton elephant. So you've got to have bees to make it work.
That's a great point. Active hive, populated fence, and then, layer it with other methods, you can have a very effective deterrent. Oh, one last question coming through. Are these beehive fences set throughout the year, or is it just through the active crop seasons? And then the fences are removed to allow free roaming of the elephants?
Good point. So we find it pretty hard to move the hives. Once there are bees in them and you've got them hung between two pretty sturdy posts, it's pretty hard to move them. You can move one or two, but it's quite an effort. So we recommend that you keep them in place, but you're absolutely right that you could take the connecting wire down. So if you don't have any crops in your farm and you're trying to kind of keep on maintenance and it's the peak dry season, you could always take the wire down and let anything come in and out. Even your cows might want to come in and graze on the leftover crop. So you could totally do that, reconnect it. And also if you're going away, some of our farmers go away during the dry season, so they just want to leave their hives. But in a way, I think it's better just to keep your beehive fence up and running, because over time the elephants just learn. They learn that's a dangerous farm. They don't want to come into it anymore. And so they just stop approaching the farm. And that's what we've found in some areas, is that they're just not getting elephants anymore because either they've learned or they've told each other. So I would just keep it active if you can. And it just helps the validity of your fence the whole way through. And that's what it's all about.
Absolutely. Question. In East Aceh, there is a trial of stingless bee fencing. How effective has it been? Do you know?
Wow. No, I don't know. I mean, stingies are fabulous, amazing creatures, and they produce some small amount of honey as well. But I doubt that would keep elephants away, because you've got to have that negative interaction for the elephants. So I can't see that deterring elephants. They wouldn't know that that was a risk. So unless it was just a human-made form that looked different, elephants don't. Sometimes they won't approach novel things for a while. But I don't think stingless bees would work to keep elephants away.
Just to add on to that, Lucy, they trialed stingless bees in Thailand as well, but what they did was they were using it as their control, and then that was becoming more of an alternative livelihood project. So they'd keep the stingless bees there just for honey production and on the fence, but they weren't deterring elephants per se, because there's no, as Lucy said, there's no negative effect of it. So it was more of an alternative livelihood project.
So cool.
Very good to know. Chase, I think I will throw it back to you. Thank you guys so much.
Yes. I think we speak for everyone on the call when we thank Lucy and Ash for their time and generosity in sharing their expertise. Clearly, there's a lot of work going on in beehive fences, and it's great that you all are sort of leading the way and trying to collate all these resources so that we promote human-elephant coexistence as much as possible in these landscapes. Thank you all for attending today. We have recorded this session. We'll make it available to all attendees shortly after we receive it. We just need Zoom to send it to us and then trim it up, and we'll post it online for everyone to see. Other than that, Ash and Lucy have provided their contact information in the slides, so if you want to get in touch with them, I invite you to do so, and they're incredibly generous in offering their insight. Other than that, thank you all. Have a good rest of your day, and we look forward to connecting with you soon.